My name is Samson. I have 15 scars on my hands, and each scar is a grave. Every Friday night in 1853, the rich people of Louisiana sat on clean seats, drank champagne, and watched us fight in a sand ring where roses once grew. They called it entertainment. We called it staying alive. At the top, in a green silk dress, sat Madame Evangeline Thibodeau. She smiled when men fell. Behind the arena, a wooden platform reached over the dark bayou. In that water, the alligators floated like dead logs with shining eyes. When a fighter lost, the platform shook, the water moved, and the night swallowed another name. I was their champion, not by choice, by chains. I learned the sound of keys, the weakness of wood, the way a gas lamp coughs before it dies. I counted footsteps, faces, habits. I was not only fighting to live, I was learning how to end the show. If you believe the dead deserve a voice, subscribe and comment your state below. Tonight, the ladies' arena will hear the truth it tried to bury, and the green dress that ruled our fear, it will meet the water it fed. Tell me, if freedom needs the guilty to face fear, would you make them? I was born in cane fields where sugar was sweeter than gold to the masters, but bitter as blood to us. They say sugar melts soft on the tongue. For me, it always tasted like iron, because I learned its price through the taste of my own blood whenever the overseer's whip cut my back. My mama told me once, "Keep your head low, son. Listen more than you speak." My daddy added, "Every sound is a map in the swamp." Those words became my compass when chains broke our family apart. Mama was sold to a rice field. My baby sister to a man who smiled too wide, and me, dragged here to the Thibodeau plantation. I never saw them again. The Thibodeau house rose high with white columns, proud as if it wanted to float above the misery it commanded. Behind it, roses once bloomed in red, pink, and white, but after the old master was found shot by accident on a hunt, the roses were dug out. His widow, Madame Evangeline, replaced them with sand. A garden of beauty became an arena of death. The rules were simple. Work until your hands split, obey until your spirit broke, and if chosen, fight until one of you fell. She kept the alligators hungry. Their eyes shone red in torchlight. I can still hear the platform creak when bodies rolled into the bayou, and the water splash as jaws snapped shut. The first time they forced me to fight, I was no gladiator, just a man who wanted to live. I was matched against a boy too thin to swing a hoe. I begged my eyes to say, "I'll make it quick." He nodded once, then rushed at me so the crowd would cheer. I did what chains made me do. When he hit the water, I swore I'd never forget his face. But the lady noticed me that night. She liked the way I did not beg. "This one carries stories in his shoulders," she said. That was how I became her champion. Not because I was strong, but because I had no choice. Still, I listened. I listened to the jingling keys on overseers' belts, to the way lamps hissed before they dimmed, to the weight of wood when the bleachers creaked under too many bodies. Each sound was a secret. Each secret was a path. I carried those sounds like a map under my skin. Louisiana bayou. Roses turn to sand. Boy's death becomes a champion's burden. If every sound in your prison could be a map, would you learn it? Her name was Madame Evangeline Thibodeau, and she wore cruelty like a jewel. 40 years old, still beautiful in the way money can preserve a face. Her emerald gowns shimmered under torchlight, and her fan snapped open and shut like a whip. She sat in her high box seat, always above us, like a queen looking down on pawns she already planned to sacrifice. She called us her entertainers, but to her we were no more than animals she owned. She even called the alligators in the bayou her pets. She laughed when their jaws closed, when silk shoes tapped excitedly as another body slipped into the water. That sound, the crowd clapping in rhythm with the swamp's hunger, was a hymn to her. She liked to design the fights herself. Brothers against brothers, friends who had shared blankets in the quarters, husbands against wives. She called it poetry in motion. I called it hell. My third night in the arena, I saw her smile when a man cried his brother's name as the spear went in. That was the night I stopped believing she had any human left in her. But not everyone in the big house followed her heart. I noticed a girl carrying champagne trays among the guests. Ruth. Her eyes didn't match her steps. Her tray trembled when men laughed too hard at our pain. One night she passed me a glass with a faint scratch on the stem. I pretended not to notice, but later I found a folded scrap hidden beneath a plank near the holding pen. It had only one word: Friday. In the carpenter's shed, I also met Benjamin, the man who built the very bleachers that held our oppressors. He whispered while his hammer struck wood, "Every beam remembers. Every brace knows where it's weak." He would point at a joint, nod slightly, and move on before overseers could notice. The lady thought she had pets in cages and monsters in the swamp, but she did not know we had eyes sharper than her fan, ears stronger than her orchestra. Each Friday she made us fight for her joy, but I was already fighting for something else. The day when her pets would turn on her and the sand would drink her name. A lady in emerald, a maid with trembling hands, a carpenter marking wood. If your enemy smiled at your pain, would you wait or would you plan? Rebellion cannot be shouted. It must be whispered. It must look like prayer, like work, like nothing at all. In the kitchen, Ruth invented a language with spoons. One knot of cloth tied around the handle meant tonight she drinks. 2 knots meant guests are many. 3 knots meant watch your step. Overseers restless. When an overseer walked in, Ruth switched the spoon to her other hand. Left meant safe. Right meant danger. Nobody noticed. They thought she was just stirring soup. In the quarters, hymns carried hidden orders. If someone held the word Jordan too long, it meant change of plan. If the word home rose high, it meant we meet by the cypress. We sang our maps while the overseers tapped their boots, thinking they were listening to harmless church songs. Benjamin gave us drawings carved into bark, lines and circles that looked like children's scribbles. But they were the skeleton of the arena. He showed us where the braces were eaten by termites, where one push could make the bleachers sway. Wood remembers, he whispered, and wood can betray its master. We used moss too. A strip tied to the left side of a fence post meant go here. Right side meant do not. If rain washed it away, we tied it again. The swamp became our chalkboard, and every tree held a sentence only we could read. Sarah, the woman who had lost husband and son in the arena, had not spoken for months. But one night she placed a handful of glowing coals in a clay pot and whispered, "If all the lamps die together, stars will light our path." That was the first time I saw fire in her eyes since her family died. At night, the bayou joined us. Frogs croaked like drums covering our steps. Owls screamed when riders came too close. Even the water moccasins seemed to slide away from our feet, as if the swamp itself hated the Thibodeaux. 13 of us gathered in the abandoned sugar mill, its iron rollers rusted and silent. Moonlight poured through broken windows, painting the floor in silver. We formed a circle. 13 hands went in. 13 oaths were spoken. No one asked for survival. We only asked not to waste the dead. That night I knew. This was no longer a dream of escape. It was the birth of judgment. A spoon becomes a code. A hymn becomes a map. 13 oaths under moonlight. If your only weapon was a song, would you sing it in code? We built our plan like a bookkeeper's ledger. Every debt written down, every payment prepared. 13 steps. 13 lives willing to risk everything. 1, the lamps. Benjamin filed the gas couplings until they were weak. At the right moment, a hard shove would send darkness across the arena like a blanket pulled over the guilty. 2, the locks. Ruth studied the key rings while serving wine. She learned which one opened the armory closet, which one freed the holding pens. She rubbed soap into the lock so it stuck, training the overseer to jiggle it. Habits became traps. 3, the poison. Ruth dusted the champagne and oysters with rat powder. Not enough to kill, just enough to make stomachs turn and hands tremble. 4, the weapons. We hid knives in cane bundles, hammers under planks, pistols in the wall of the abandoned mill. Each cache had a name: Lily, Jonah, Birch. When the time came, the names would become fire. 5, the Gators. The platform was no longer just a grave. It was a tool. Panic would drive the guilty to the edge, and the swamp would finish what we began. 6, the gate. The cypress gate stuck when pushed too hard. In a stampede, it would trap them inside their own show. 7, the boy. Eli was small enough to slip beneath the bleachers. He would tug a string tied to a lantern as a signal. Ready. 8, the shout. My job. Raise the spear not at my opponent but at the ladies' box. A single word to split the night now. 9. The overseers. They would fall first. Their guns had to be silenced before the crowd found courage. 10. The photographer. She had hired him to freeze our shame. We planned that his last plate would capture her fear instead. 11. The fire. Sarah carried her clay pot of coals. When poured onto the hall wicks, the house would darken and chaos would favor us. 12. The watchers. If one plan failed, its twin would rise. If a twin fell, another hand would carry it. 13. The ending. Madame Evangeline would not die in her chair. She would stand on the sand where roses once grew, facing the bayou she fed. When we finished, we sealed the ledger not with ink but with silence. No paper, no proof, just breath, memory, and hate sharpened into patience. We were not just planning escape. We were writing a story where the dead could finally answer back. 13 debts written, 13 answers prepared, one arena waiting for its judge. If freedom came with 13 chances, would you risk them all? Madame Evangeline Thibodeau wanted the whole South to see her cruelty dressed as glory. She called it her grandest spectacle yet, the second anniversary of her Gladiator nights. She chose the date herself, Friday, October 13th, 1853. She liked how it sounded. Day for history, she said. Invitations spread across Louisiana like fire on dry cane. Senators, judges, plantation lords, and their jeweled wives. She even paid a photographer to haul his glass plates and black cloth all the way from New Orleans. So the world will remember, she boasted. She promised them freedom for the final champion, though every soul on the plantation knew it was a lie. No one had ever left her arena alive except in chains or water. The bleachers doubled in size, lined with cushions for her guests' comfort. Gas lamps were polished until they gleamed like moons, an orchestra tuned for death, adding clarinet and drums to the sad violin. The lady herself paraded in a new gown of deep purple silk, the color of bruises and kings. Ruth moved quietly, watching key rings change hands as overseers rehearsed. Benjamin tested the new braces, tapping wood with his hammer as if praising it, but listening for its weakness. I watched the guests arrive early, strutting like roosters in Sunday clothes. They thought they were walking into a party. They were walking into a tomb. That Thursday night, we gathered in the abandoned sugar mill. Moonlight cut silver lines across the rusted rollers. 50 of us now stood in that circle. I drew the arena in dust with my finger. Beans for knives, pine cones for guards, nails for lamps. Each symbol moved as I pushed it, and every head in that room followed, memorizing. If we fail, I said, our blood will join the sand. But if we succeed, theirs will too. For the first time in months, Sarah spoke loud. We owe graves a harvest, she said. And the circle of 50 answered, Amen. When we left that night, the swamp seemed to breathe with us. Even the owls stayed quiet, as if they were waiting to see who would own the next moonrise. October 13th, purple silk, a promise of freedom that hit a funeral. If your enemy promised you freedom as bait, would you pretend to believe it? The night came heavy with heat. The torches spat smoke and the orchestra struck its first cruel note. The bleachers shone with silk and jewels. Laughter rang like coins hitting wood. They thought themselves safe in their kingdom of death. The first fight began. 2 men dragged from a neighboring plantation, forced to circle each other with crude spears. Their bodies gleamed with sweat under the gas lamps and the crowd leaned forward, greedy. When one finally fell, his body was hauled to the platform, and the swamp accepted him without question. The water swallowed like it had done 100 times before. The second fight was worse. 2 brothers. The lady always loved that trick. The older begged with his eyes, the younger shook his head, and still the overseer cocked his rifle. Fight or both die. The older made it quick, stabbing through tears. The younger collapsed on his brother's chest, sobbing, while the crowd stood to applaud. Madame Evangeline fanned herself as if she were watching a ballet. Under the bleachers, Eli tugged the cord tied to a lantern. The flame above shook once, our signal. Ruth was moving through the crowd with her tray, her marked glass already in the mayor's hand. His face twitched as the poison soured his stomach. Benjamin pressed his shoulder against a weak brace. The wood groaned but held, waiting for his push. Then they called my name. The crowd roared as if the devil himself had stepped out. Our champion, Madame Evangeline announced. Across from me stood Marcus, my brother in all but blood. We circled each other, spears raised, pretending to be enemies. The crowd stamped their feet. Bets flew like birds. We clashed hard, but our strikes were empty, practiced. I swung wide, he ducked, he lunged high, I blocked low. To the guests, it looked like a battle. To us, it was theater. The lady grew impatient. She snapped her fan twice, the sign to end it. But I did not. I slowed, then turned my spear, lifting it not toward Marcus, but toward her gilded box seat. Marcus mirrored me. 2 spears pointed upward. The crowd gasped. Confusion spread like smoke. And in that pause, the pause we had been waiting for, the swamp held its breath. 2 brothers broken. 2 friends pretending. 2 spears raised where roses once grew. If the world ordered you to kill your brother, would you obey or betray the order? The word left my mouth like thunder. It was not a whisper. It was not a plea. It was the strike of a hammer on iron. Benjamin shoved his weight into the brace he had weakened. The wood cracked like a bone. One side of the bleachers tilted, and screams rose higher than the orchestra's strings. At the same time, Ruth yanked the loosened gas coupling. The lamps hissed, coughed, then died. Darkness poured over the arena like a storm cloud. The fine ladies shrieked, clutching pearls that could not save them. In that instant, we stood still. Stillness was our weapon. The crowd flailed in blindness, but we knew every corner, every creak, every shadow. Overseers drew pistols. Eli, quick as a snake, pulled the cord tied beneath the bleachers. One gun fired into the sky. Another misfired altogether. The third shot its own owner in the leg. Marcus struck first. His spear found the overseer who carried the master keys. The man fell, and the keys rang on the sand like freedom itself. Sarah tipped her pot of coals into the hallway lamps. Smoke rolled out, choking the guests as their world collapsed around them. The photographer's plate exploded in a white flash, freezing the chaos forever. A lady's shocked face, her mouth open in rage and terror. His camera would never capture another smile. The poisoned wine began its work. The mayor hunched over, clutching his stomach. The judge stumbled down the steps. Their arrogance curdled into weakness. Then the panic came. The crowd rushed the cypress gate, stuck fast just as we had planned. Bodies slammed against it, piling like cattle trapped for slaughter. The only way left was the platform. The wood groaned, and the bayou opened its mouth. I leapt into the bleachers. My spear handle cracked across a senator's face. He begged, "Please, spare me." I remembered how many pleases had been ignored by men like him. His own words had condemned others. Tonight, silence answered him. Marcus climbed into the lady's box. He looked her in the eye, the biggest man I ever knew, and yet the smallest sound filled the night. He said one word, "Down," and for the first time she obeyed. Darkness falls. Keys hit the sand. The gate sticks. The hunters lose their ground. When the powerful fall into fear, should mercy follow or justice? The sand that once drank our blood now became a courtroom floor. We circled the survivors in the same ring where brothers, fathers, and sons had been forced to kill each other. This time it was not for their amusement. It was for judgment. Benjamin gathered scraps from pockets, wager slips, letters, debts, even jokes written about us. He stacked them high on a chair like evidence. "Tonight," he said, "the dead will hear the charges." The first name was Judge Caldwell. His lips quivered, his wig tilted, but his voice still tried to sound important. His crime: condemning enslaved men to hang for stealing food from their own labor. Sarah stepped forward. She spoke the names of those men as if calling them home. The judge stammered, "I have children." Sarah's eyes cut him where no blade could. So did they. The mayor of New Orleans was next. He had once placed a coin on my life, betting I would fall before the third strike. I pressed that very coin into the sand until it disappeared. "You gambled with men's lives," I said. "Now the sand takes your coin back." Even the photographer was dragged forward. He had hidden his plates, hoping to save the images of our humiliation. "Shoot again," Marcus ordered, shoving him toward his camera. But this time, capture truth. With trembling hands, he aimed the lens at Madame Evangeline, no longer on her throne, but standing in the dust like any other mortal. Then came her turn. I spoke her name loud enough for the swamp to carry it. Madame Evangeline Thibodeau. Her list of crimes needed no paper. Every scream, every body thrown to the bayou, every smile she gave when families tore themselves apart. "You called it entertainment," I said. "We call it murder. She lifted her chin. I am a lady of standing. You are property. I circled her slowly, spear dragging in the sand. No, I told her. We are the jury. You are the accused, and this arena you built is now your court. The crowd of survivors, pale and shaking, sat forced in the bleachers. They watched the same way they had made us watch, only now the roles were reversed. For the first time, the arena had true silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of judgment. The sand becomes a court. The guilty hear their names. The lady stands accused. If the chance came to judge those who crushed you, would you let them speak or let them fall? We saved her for last. The crowd of survivors huddled in the bleachers, their jeweled hands trembling, their fine clothes stained with sand and sweat. They had cheered for years, but now their voices were gone. They would watch her end the way she had watched ours. We brought down her nephew, Philippe, the boy who laughed the loudest on fight nights. He had bet silver coins on who would bleed faster, and he had always cheered when I struck the final blow. Tonight he would hold a spear. Tonight she would face her own family. No, Madame Evangeline gasped. Her purple silk gown was torn, her diamonds scattered in the dirt. Not him. He's only a boy. Marcus shoved the spear into Philippe's shaking hands. So were the boys you fed to the swamp, he said. We placed a weapon in her grip, too. She tried to hold it steady, but her arms trembled. She looked at me, eyes flashing like a cornered animal. You can't do this, she hissed. I am society. You are entertainment, I answered. And tonight you perform. The signal was given. They circled each other in the sand, aunt and nephew. Mirror of all the blood games she had forced on us. Philippe struck clumsily, fear in his every move. But she fought with the desperation of a woman who finally knew death was real. She cut his leg and he fell crying out. She raised her spear for the killing blow. Stop, I barked, and she froze. For the first time, my voice carried command she could not ignore. Look, her head turned toward the platform. The bayou rippled. Eyes like red coals floated just above the surface. The gators were waiting. Her pets. Philippe surged upward, driven by pain and panic, and rammed the spear into her chest. She gasped, staggered, and fell back into the sand that had already tasted too many lives. Her purple silk spread dark as it drank her blood. Philippe collapsed beside her, sobbing. We dragged both to the platform. The wood moaned as their weight pressed it down. The swamp opened its black mouth. The silk ribbon floated once, green and purple against torchlight, before the water swallowed it whole. The alligators thrashed, tails slapping like drums. The hymn of the bayou had never sounded sweeter. The lady who had fed them for years had finally joined their feast. For the first time since I had stepped into that arena, I felt the ground sigh like justice. Aunt and nephew in the sand. Silk-torn, the swamp takes what it is owed. If your tormentor begged as their end came, would you answer or let silence speak? When the sky began to pale, we lit the match. Flames licked the Thibodeau mansion, curling curtains and swallowing ledgers that once counted us like cattle. The arena itself groaned as fire chewed through beams Benjamin had hammered years before. He stood silent, arms crossed, watching his own work collapse into ash. For the first time, he did not curse his craft. He blessed its burning. Smoke lifted above the bayou, a dark flag announcing to Louisiana that slaves had turned hunters. Every nearby plantation would see it. Every overseer would whisper of it. That was the point. We divided as planned. Small groups vanish faster than large ones. Sarah took the pine route east with a handful of women. Benjamin led a crew into the Atchafalaya Basin. Thick swamp, quicksand, and snakes, where slave catchers would not dare follow. Ruth guided others toward the Mississippi River, hoping to find Quakers who were rumored to help runaways. Marcus and I took 12, mostly women and children, north. The little ones could not walk fast, so we carried them on shoulders or wrapped them in shawls as if they were part of us. Dogs barked in the distance. Riders cursed. Horns blew. The county had woken. The swamp saved us. Mud sucked at our feet, hiding tracks. Mosquitoes cloaked our skin. Biting so fiercely the hounds lost our scent. Once a rider passed so close I could hear the jingle of his spur. I pressed my palm over a child's mouth until the man rode by. My father's words guided me still. Every sound is a map. That night, silence was our only road. We found a canebrake thick as a wall and slept sitting, mud up to our knees. Hunger chewed at us, but freedom filled our stomachs better than cornmeal. By dawn, we reached the river. There, a fisherman with skin as dark as ours nodded silently and showed us a hidden skiff. We paid him with nothing but hope. He pushed us out anyway. As we drifted into the current, I looked back once. Smoke still rose where the mansion had stood. The bayou had eaten its queen. The arena had been reduced to ash. Behind me, the children whispered of Canada like it was heaven. Ahead, the water carried us north. We had no map but faith, no weapons but will. And yet, for the first time, the air tasted like something new, like choice. House to ash, arena to smoke, feet to water, freedom carried by current. If freedom meant mud, silence, and hunger, would you still take the journey? By the time soldiers reached the Thibodeau plantation, nothing stood but black beams and smoke. They found shoes half-burned, rings pried off fingers, scraps of lace tangled in ash. The bleachers were charred bones of wood. The arena, once the pride of Madame Evangeline, was nothing more than smoldering earth. What they did not find was her body. The swamp had swallowed it whole. Some whispered her emerald silk still floated in the bayou, glowing under moonlight, her spirit wandering where roses once bloomed. They said torches flickered there without hands to light them, and a woman's laugh carried across the water. Ghost tale or not, the living knew the truth. The lady who fed her pets had become their feast. Word of our rebellion spread fast. In taverns and markets, whispers grew. Slaves rose up in Louisiana. 80 white folks dead, the lady gone to the Gators. Planters tightened chains, passed harsher codes, and filled pulpits with sermons of fear. But fear cuts both ways. The enslaved heard the same whispers, and for the first time they believed rebellion was possible. Many of us scattered. Some were caught and hung on trees as warnings. But others made it through. Ruth found safety with Quakers near Natchez. Benjamin guided his group through the Atchafalaya and vanished into legend. Sarah was last seen leading a band toward Alabama swamps. Marcus and I pushed north. 3 months of mud, hunger, and danger. We walked through forests where bounty hunters tracked with dogs, and rivers that nearly froze us to bone. But we made it to Canada. There in Toronto, I became a blacksmith. Each hammer strike reminded me of that night, when iron turned from weapon into freedom. I told my story to anyone who would listen. Churches, halls, street corners. I spoke the names of those who died so they would not be forgotten. The world had to know what happened in that arena. That we were not just property. That we fought. The Thibodeau Rebellion never made the slaveholders' history books. They wanted silence. But memory survives where ink refuses to write. Every scar on my hand is a page. Every grave in that bayou is a chapter. And you, listening now, you carry the last line. If you are still watching, you care about buried history. Subscribe, share this story, and comment your state below. Let the world know these voices still matter. Because the bayou keeps secrets, but it also keeps justice. And the night Madame Evangeline Thibodeau became entertainment for her own arena, that night still speaks. Ashes, whispers, ghosts. Names carried north. The bayou keeps justice. Do you think history remembers truth? Or only what the powerful choose to write?